So I had a relative who asked me, why is Bernie so popular with millennials? And at the time, I didn't respond because I didn't want to say the wrong thing. I was worried that my response might hurt, hurt Bernie in his campaign. And I also had heard that many people believe that millennials are very pushy, they don't know how to listen. So I didn't say anything at the time. I have thought about that moment a lot, and I've realized that I made a mistake there, and that it was the perfect time for me to actually be able to talk to somebody who was being open-minded about something that typically they might not have been. So rather than lose that opportunity ever again, I've decided to go ahead and record this and try to vocalize some of the reasons that he has become so much more than a politician and has actually turned into a movement. I think that at the heart of the matter, even more important than policy, I hate to say that, and I'm not sure if I agree with that 100%, but I think really at the bottom of it is that millennials can't trust their politicians. We see over and over and over again, we're promised the world. We're promised these amazing things that sound so wonderful. We get excited and we get out there and we vote, and then the politician, not only do they completely forget about trying to do the things that they promise, but often they actually vote against the things that they were elected for. So I think that as a millennial, it's really painful to watch the political process and know that, man, I might like what they're saying, but how do I know? How do I know that they're not just saying it? And that is where Bernie really is unique, because not only has he had the same message for years and years and years, he has been for civil rights, and he has believed in the different programs that help Americans as opposed to corporate interests and money interests. But more than that, he has voted the way that he says he's going to vote. Because it's so easy right now to go online, see someone's voting record. So you see, oh, well, they've said some really cool things, but when it comes right down to it, they voted in completely different ways. And that's what matters, right? So Bernie was actually one of the few people that voted against the Iraq War, which I think most people, even Republicans, recognize as a very bad idea at this point. It has caused a lot of American lives to be lost. It has cost us a huge amount of money. It really has not resolved anything. It's destabilized the region. It certainly hasn't helped us. So, but he was brave enough to go against popular opinion. He actually led the charge against that. So we see that he is willing to do the things that are unpopular, but that turn out to be exactly right. He also voted against taking away the regulations that Glass-Steagall actually put in place to keep banks from growing to the point where they can actually put our economy in jeopardy, allowing these banks to do things that are very risky with our money. And taking away some of these regulations actually helped cause our financial collapse. He didn't just talk the talk, he walked the walk, and he walked it when no one was paying attention. He walked it when everybody's voting records weren't coming up right in your face. You know, a lot of these politicians, their record has come back to bite them. There definitely are things that you can critique about any human being. Unfortunately, a lot of the critiques that I hear about Bernie are not based in reality. which is it's very disappointing, because if we can't agree on what reality is, then having a conversation, having a discussion about it is not really going to work out very well. So I wanted to address a few of the major problems or major issues that people have with him. In Vermont, when he was mayor, he actually balanced the budget. He helped fix the monetary policies that Vermont was involved in. He is much more fiscally conservative than Trump. I mean, Trump has taken our budget to a whole new level. So it's not fair to say that just because he wants programs that actually support the average American and that money goes towards the individuals who live here, as opposed to, I don't know, like fighting a war for Saudi Arabia. I mean, we don't give our own citizens health care, but we're going to go and bomb Iran for Saudi Arabia? Actually, I really shouldn't. I probably won't even put that in this, because that's going to make a lot of people mad. And I really just want to help you open your mind up and realize that Bernie is not fiscally stupid like everybody makes him out to be. He has a record balancing that Vermont budget. He was actually listed as one of the best mayors in America, and that was in the 1987 News and World Report. I wanted to check just to make sure I didn't get it wrong, because the last thing I want to do is to put out incorrect information. People really get stuck on the idea that he is a Democratic Socialist, and I get that. I understand, I do. And part of me doesn't like that he says that part out loud, because it's easy to fearmonger about. But the other part of me appreciates that he is so honest and so out there, because socialism is very different than democratic socialism. And Social Security is socialist, public education is socialist, Medicare, Medicaid, all of the programs that we have. I mean, my goodness, we have police, we have firefighters, all these different functions that the government provides. They're socialist functions. So really, without a certain amount of socialist functions, a government is kind of worthless, really, because a good government, should be there to support its people, to make it a better place for its people to live. Of course, there are governments that are absolutely terrible and make living in that area miserable. But the concept of a good government is one that helps its people. So let's talk about some of the legislation that he has supported and opposed that makes his record so wonderful, that makes his record such a strength. He opposed the Patriot Act, which was actually very popular because that was right after September 11th. We wanted to do something. We wanted to protect ourselves. We were frightened. And the Patriot Act, it took away our rights to have our personal privacy. It took away our protections against unreasonable search and seizure. It took away so many of our fundamental rights as Americans, some of which were outlined in the Constitution, because we were frightened. And he saw where this would go, and he opposed it. And since then, he has been fighting against it and trying to get different reforms to give us our privacy back, which we've lost. And the more that we find out, the more whistleblowers that show up on the scene, we find out that the Patriot Act has been a very bad idea for the rights of the average American. He also has worked for campaign finance reform. And you have to realize that if someone gives you a ton of money and you depend on that money to get your advertisements, to get your influence, because that money, not only does it allow you to get your voice out there, because there are a lot of people who don't pay that much attention to politics because they don't have time. A lot of people, because they're working so hard, because the cost of living has gone up and our wages have stayed stagnant, which is another thing that he's fought to improve upon. But I digress. So a lot of people don't have the time or the desire to learn about what's going on politically. So you depend on that money to get your voice out there. And say maybe you want to do something that's great, right? You want to build a school and you believe in it, and you know that if you don't accept this money, then it's going to go to your opponent and they're probably going to get there. And your opponent is worse than you are in every way, you feel like. And all you have to do is agree, I'm going to lift a few regulations and I'm going to let this particular industry regulate itself. And they're good people, so they'll regulate themselves. We can trust them. That's not that bad. It's a small price to pay, right? The problem is that sort of thinking can lead to the water crisis in Flint. That sort of thinking makes it so that our politicians can't actually support the will of the people. That means that our politicians have to, bit by bit, go against their beliefs, their intuition, their value system, and bit by bit, it corrupts. It has to. I'm not saying that politicians are corrupt because they accept the money, but once they do, they're beholden. And they either have to continue accepting it because now it's their job to be a politician. If they don't get reelected, they're out of job. And maybe they have wonderful things they want to do, so they might as well take the money because the other person's going to take the money if they don't. And then the other person's going to win and they'll do worse things. It just allows these companies to have control over our political system when the political system should only be about the American person, the American worker, anybody who is an American citizen, and not the corporations that we've built up. So he has fought against the different legislation that would allow runaway campaign financing by the private sector. All the different countries of the world that talk about the structure of government in different countries, they recognize us as an oligarchy. We are no longer a democracy. Let that sink in. We're not a democracy anymore. So we have to take that back because that's what makes America great. And that means giving the power back to the people. That means taking this oligarchy where the richest individuals control our political process and bringing it back into the hands of the average American so we can become a democracy again. So don't be worried about the concept of a democratic socialist. Don't be scared by rhetoric. Realize that these programs are what we need to even have a democracy. It's true, and it's frightening. But we need to understand that as our economy grows and wealth continues to be moved to the top 1%, even if you don't care about the average American, which is something that I hope is not the case, but even if you don't care, If you take tax breaks and you give them to the wealthiest Americans, then that money is taken out of circulation because they're already spending everything they're going to spend. They already have more than the money that they need. So that is just taken out of circulation, and it makes our country poorer. Now, when you give money back to the people as a whole, people who would immediately need to spend it because they don't have that much money, then the money stays in circulation. So you want it to go to the poorer Americans. You want to take away the poorest Americans' debt. It's just the way that economies work. The Great Depression happened in a large part because we had a huge amount of debt. And so people stopped buying new things. So the companies that had so much money, they started to fail because without your average American buying the products, the company is nothing. And when the companies start to fail, then the stock market starts to fail. So even if you don't care about anyone other than yourself, when you have the average American so overladen with debt, so poor that they can't buy all the things that they want to because their wages are stagnant. Productivity is higher than it's ever been in America, but our wages have stayed the same and the cost of living has increased.